This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 88, entitled Science's War Against, in brackets, Satanist Judaism. Description. This flyer suggests that Satanist Judaism is one of the vilest religions ever invented by humanity and should be wiped out by being discredited by science, thus ridding the world of the worst criminals against humanity in history who believe in this Satanist garbage. Flyer itself. Science's war against, in brackets, Satanist Judaism. I have several interests on the social/political front. My main interest, that takes most of my time, is being a globicator, that's a global educator, making YouTube lecture course videos in PhD level pure math and math physics for free to educate the world, as well as building that's electronic libraries with links to, as far as possible, full content books and research papers, so that bright peasants with an IQ in the top 1% can teach themselves at that level for free. For the rest of my time, when I'm not studying for my video lectures, I'm concerned with the rise of the massively intelligent machine that I'm world known for, father of the Artelect war, cosmism, Terranism, IQ gap, giga-death, etc. With writing essays expressing my hatred of Jewish central banksters who are now destroying whole continents, the US and Europe, with their paper currency debt note Ponzi schemes, and with MGTOW masculism. Those of you who read my regular comments/flyers on MGTOW-masculism on Sandman's site know that I spend about an hour or two a day on this theme. Now, I wrote this flyer 1-2 years ago, so it was that time that I built up quite a stock of these flyers. I have nearly 200 now at the time that I'm recording this. Lately, I've become increasingly aware that my Jewish bankster and masculist MGTOW interests are merging. I'm becoming increasingly conscious that there's an intimate link between the two, in the sense that I see growing evidence that the Jewish banksters were behind the rift between the sexes by playing a critical role in the rise of modern feminism. Watch Aaron Russo, that's A-A-R-O-N, Russo or Russo, R-U-S-S-O. Watch Aaron Russo's interview with Alex Jones, in which Russo says that David Rockefeller, one of the major Jewish banksters, actually he died recently, or both of them died, told him that the Rockefeller Foundation was behind the funding of feminism. For example, financially supporting Gloria Steinem's Ms. magazine. It has been a tactic of the Jewish religious elite for several thousand years to divide and conquer the host communities that they parasite on. By fostering divisions within a host society, the Jews can deflect attention from the society away from themselves and make it easier for them to exploit the host society without too much attention. The Jewish religious elite did this with the blacks in the US. The NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored Peoples, Blacks Lib organization, was started, funded and led behind the scenes by Jews. The aim being to foster division and hatred between blacks and whites. By fostering feminism and, very probably, some quiet bribery behind the scenes of the gender politicians to pass new divorce laws that the second-wave feminists were pushing for, in turn created a divorce court system that was and remains toxic for men. Divorcing fathers typically lose their kids, their house, pay child support and alimony to their ex-fluffy wives. Men are being financially massacred. This divorce massacring, in turn, has led to the MGTOW and masculist movements, which are men who refuse to marry, to have kids, and spend their money on themselves. This, in turn, is wiping out the population, because 70% of young men under 35 in the US and Japan are now MGTOWs in practice, if not in philosophy. One of the major prophecies of the religious Jews, featuring prominently in the Talmud, That's the religious Jews' major religious document. Actually, it's a whole series of documents of religious commentary on Jewish religious ideas, is that when the Jewish Messiah comes to earth, he will destroy the Goy, a Jewish word for non-Jew, with connotations of the word cattle, and rule the world from Jerusalem. In the 1700s, Jacob Frank, a disciple of Shabbatai Tzvi, Tzvi, although spellings differ, who thought he was the Jewish Messiah, and 1 million Jews believed him, that's talking about Tzvi, taught that the more evil that religious Jews can commit, the sooner the Jewish Messiah will come to earth, kill off the Goy, and save the Jews. Frank was an out-and-out Jewish Satanist, a branch of traditional Judaism. Frank got financial support from the early Rothschilds, who were themselves Shabbatean Frankists. Once that happened, the world was plunged into massive evil because the Rothschilds enabled Frank's vision to become a reality. As a result, the world has been plunged, largely due to the machinations, bribery, murder, and behind-the-scenes treachery of the Jewish central banksters, into 2 world wars, major depressions, the debt enslavement of whole continents, etc. The Jewish central banksters in the US, once they had taken over the right to issue the currency, originating from a private company run by Jewish banksters, namely the Fed, that's the Federal Reserve System, they were able to lend governments to pay for 2 world wars and generate the Great Depression of the 30s. In the early 1920s, Paul Warburg, one of the worst of the US agents of the Rothschilds, who wrote the draft Federal Reserve Act, founded the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, to take political control of the US, and particularly its foreign policy, so that US money could be sent to Israel and have the US, with all its military might, defend the existence of Israel. The CFR today is now comprised of 80% Jews, and they've taken over the foreign policy of the US with their Jewish neocons. So, to come to the main point of this flyer, the Jewish religion lies behind the takeover of the US in both financial and political terms by a Jewish bankster elite. The Jewish religion is one of the vilest of all the religion ever invented by humanity because it preaches hatred of the Goy, that is, non-Jews, that is, 99.8% of humanity. Because of this religion, we had Shabbatai Tzvi, and then Jacob Frank, and then the Rothschild banksters, then the creation of the Fed to debt enslave Americans with its paper dollar interest-bearing debt note, then the CFR, and the now constant wars that forced the CFR Jewish-controlled and bribed US Congress to pay fortunes to the Jewish-owned military-industrial complex. The major countries, US, Europe and Japan, are about to be smashed by these Jewish Satanists, seeing their economies destroyed by the paper currency debt note Ponzi schemes, where the Jewish-controlled central banks issue all the currency that governments pay back with interest. To get the money to pay the interest, the government has to borrow more money from the Jewish central banks. So with compound interest, the debt becomes so large, the economies of whole continents are destroyed by these Ponzi pyramid schemes. Understand this, people. It's critical. So, how to remove this horrible problem of Jewish bankster control of the finances and politics of major countries? By killing the underlying religious beliefs that supports this whole Jewish Satanist enterprise of destroying the Goy and ruling the world from Jerusalem. 80% of Jews in the US marry non-Jews. At this rate, within a mere century, there'll be almost no more Jews left in the US. Their Jewish genes will have been diluted in the major Goy population. Modern non-religious Jews don't believe in the Torah nor the Talmud, the 2 major documents of the religious Jews. They are secular, that is, they don't believe in gods. They believe much more in science and have a scientific view of the world. In Israel, 85% of Israelis are secular. They don't believe in the Talmud and its ancient prophecies of a Jewish Messiah killing off the Goy and ruling the world from Jerusalem. There are Israeli moves afoot to transplant Israel to South America, to land bought and not stolen, the way the Jews stole Palestine from the Palestinians. Since 85% of Israelis don't believe that it's important for them to be living in Israel, in other words, Palestine, when they could be living in a much nicer climate and not have to fight Arabs all the time in Israel, in brackets, stolen Palestine, they may move quite readily. The Jewish banksters are actually a relic of an ancient pre-scientific religion. Those Jewish banksters who are still Frankist Satanists are living in the past, holding on to beliefs that make no sense in a scientifically dominated age. They believe essentially 2,000-year-old crap. And most Jews in the US and Israel think the same as I do, because they're not religious. So, I appeal to secular Jews to put real intellectual and scientific pressure on their Satanist colleagues to motivate these Satanist Jewish banksters to stop believing this ancient garbage and come into the modern world. Judaism preaches hatred of the Goy by religious Jews, which in turn generates anti-Semitism due to religious Jewish anti-Goyism. Religious Jews generate hatred against them wherever they go. They have been thrown out of nearly every country in Europe over the past 1,000 years, according to Jewish scholars. The secular Jews of the US are harmless and integrate into the general US population. The US Goy do not hate them, because the US secular Jews do not hate the Goy, so they get along. So secular Jews and secular Goy should combine forces to preach science to the religious Jews, showing them how silly their beliefs are, how ancient, how backward, how non-scientific, how full of fantasies that make no sense, that are mutually contradictory, that are simply garbage unworthy of being taken seriously. As religious Jews, as Frankist Jewish bankster Jews wipe themselves out by no longer believing in this Frankist Satanist religious garbage, they will cease their hatred of the Goy and stop destroying them financially and politically. The world would have been a very different place over the past few centuries if the religious Jews had never existed. No world wars, no Great Depression, no constant wars today, no dollar Ponzi scheme, enslavement, etc. So the world has very good reason to declare war on Satanist Judaism. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name De Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. Ciao.